Alrighty. I don't think we're getting anyone else at this point, so we'll go ahead and get started. Everyone can see my screen okay, I hope. Great. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. So for those who don't know me, my name is Spencer Clifford. I am program coordinator with Clean Cities, Georgia. And today we are joined by Grayson. So Grayson, if you want to come off mute, just introduce yourself. Feel free.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We're a local landscaping business here in Decatur, right outside of Atlanta, and we are an all electric. Everything from our fleet to our equipment is 100% electric. We made that transition over the last 12 months, and yeah, that's what we're here to speak about, kind of our transition from traditional gas to the EVs and equipment.
Awesome. Thanks, Grayson. Just want to thank everyone for taking some time out of their day to join the webinar. We really appreciate it. This webinar is titled Converting Home Service Vehicles to Electric Vehicles. And apologies if I'm looking this way. This is my screen here, so I don't want to. If I'm looking off the camera, I'm looking at my screen here. But thank you again so much. We really appreciate it. And we'll go ahead and hop right into it. So our agenda for today, we're going to give a quick overview of Clean Cities, Georgia, for those who maybe are not familiar. We're going to have our feature presentation from Grayson and Long Capital's electrification journey. I'll lead some moderated questions. We'll have time for live audience questions as well. And then we'll have some closing remarks and some final steps. So without further ado, so who we are. So what is Clean Cities, Georgia? So Clean Cities, Georgia, and it's a part of the National Clean Cities and Communities Network. This is a U.S. Department of Energy partnership, and everyone's main mission is to promote clean transportation. So if you draw your attention to the map here on the screen, you'll see that there is roughly around 75 coalitions across the nation that work together in their various regions to promote clean transportation and alternative fuel usage. I would like to point out our friends in California have around 10 coalitions or over 10 at this point that serve the majority of the state, and our friends in New York have, I believe, 6 or 7. Here in Georgia, we are one team, one sole and mighty team. We have a few employees that work on the entire state, and so we are always doing meaningful and impactful work. And like I mentioned, our main mission is to promote clean transportation. We are fuel agnostic, which you'll learn in the next slide. And our main goal is to reduce the use of petroleum and conventional gasoline throughout our state. So kind of what we do, again, advance clean transportation adoption through communities through fleet conversions. We have here grant matching and partnership, as well as education and outreach. And so kind of to break those down a bit more. Oh, here we go. Another person to admit. Awesome. Okay. So to break that down a bit more, with fleet conversions, we are always talking with fleets to help them kind of identify where they want to decarbonize. So we understand that, electrification tomorrow in every sector and every industry is probably not possible. So kind of identifying those steps that we can take today to help decarbonize that. So that could be usage of heavier duty vehicles with CNG and propane, renewable natural gas as well. We have here grant matching and partnerships. I like to also add identification. A lot of stakeholders and communities come to us with either grant opportunities that they're interested in, or they ask us to find grants, and we often identify those grants for them. We often serve in a role on the grant at times to be more of a project manager for that grant. And we also assist with the application process of that grant as well. And then last week, and that actually become a larger part of our work as well this year. And then another large part of our work this year has been education and outreach of the fuels below in the very blurry graphic. But I will do my best. You can see it, but we work with biodiesel, electricity, ethanol, hydrogen, natural gas. That includes compressed natural gas and renewable natural gas, as well as propane. By far, we've seen the most popular fuel we're working with is electricity, but we are seeing growing interest in hydrogen as well as natural gas in all forms, and propane with some of the few grants that are rolling out now, such as the Clean School Bus Rebate Program. So this is a good purview into what we do as a coalition, and how we serve our stakeholders. Just to kind of finalize this here, again, strategically advanced for clean transportation. We do this through connecting to unbiased data tools such as A-Fleet, which is a software and calculator that you're able to plug in various vehicles for fleets and identify where they can really have a decarbonization effect. So if that's fantastic, we also build partnerships. They receive personal expertise rooted with local context from us, only serving Georgia. And then, like I mentioned a bit earlier, we also collaborate on various funding opportunities, whether that's identifying, matching, helping apply, or serving as a project manager on that grant as well. So next, I'm going to kind of take a deeper dive into a few grant projects that Clean Cities Georgia is currently serving on that kind of are closely related to the topic of the webinar, which is converting home service company vehicles to electric vehicles. So this one grant project I'm about to hit on is special to me because I lead the project for Clean Cities Georgia, but it's called the Empower Workplace Charging Program. This is a DOE funded grant opportunity, and it's focused on education and outreach for workplaces to install electric vehicle charging stations. This is funded, like I mentioned, more of the education and helping to outreach these workplaces. And unfortunately, there's really no funds that go towards the actual installation of the chargers, but we do offer a lot of benefits. And so I can go walk through those very briefly. One of the benefits we offer that our workplaces find very helpful is our site feasibility study that we offer. So we have a contractor with a company called Integrated Solutions, which is a minority woman-owned business. And her role is to provide some context on, how many chargers should be installed at the workplace, where they should be installed, and, what type of charger should be installed, whether level 2 or level 3. And so that's something that, usually is pretty expensive for a workplace to get. Typically ranges around $1,000 to $2,000 for that site feasibility study alone that we offer at absolutely no cost to our pledges. Also, another valuable asset that we offer is, like I mentioned, kind of our bread and butter, identifying grant and funding incentives to help offset some of that capital cost that comes with installing some of this charging infrastructure. You see here, the last bullet is in Georgia. We have currently 13 out of 15 pledges. So just as a pragmatic rule, Georgia has committed to receive 15 pledges from various workplaces across the state to commit to install electric vehicle chargers. And we are at 13 right now. And we are actually tracking towards 14. And with the goal and a metric of hitting 12 of those, getting actual installations of chargers in the ground. So I say that to echo the point home of the funding opportunities available. In Georgia, we have something called Georgia Power Make Ready program, which I'm sure a few of you are familiar with. That's extremely helpful for workplaces to install electric vehicle chargers. This covers really around 50% of the upfront costs that come with installing these chargers, from the conduit, from the electricity needed, and all the infrastructure in the ground. So it covers what they call and they deem up to the charger, and that's all maintained and operated by Georgia Power itself. And so 9 of our 13 pledges currently are utilizing that program, which is, again, very helpful towards offsetting some of that capital cost. But we also have workplaces who are not in Georgia Power service territories. And for us, that's more of a challenge, but we do find some incentives. Georgia EPD, Environmental Protection Division, has a rebate for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which is up to $2,500 for businesses to install chargers that we often identify and help apply for businesses as well. And also there's this national programs like the alternative fueling and charging infrastructure tax credit that we can help identify for workplaces to install charging infrastructure as well. As I mentioned, we are committed to 12 installations. We are tracking very nicely on that. And like I said, closing in on 14 out of our 15 pledges. We just entered our 3rd year of the grant last quarter. So we're doing really well and happy to report some recent successes on the Queen City, Georgia side. Next, I wanted to highlight the Mitra EV Project Reef. This is a new project Clean Cities Georgia is serving on. It's very interesting, and we really did this to kind of become more acquainted with home service companies in our area. So just a very high-level overview of the project. This is a $2 million project to help accelerate clean transportation in electric vehicles through small and medium companies and primarily home service companies. This has a 50% cost share, so Mitra EV is paying $1 million for the project, and the DOE is also paying $1 million for the project. The real goal of the project is to create more accessible and shared DC fast charging network for companies, and especially for small and medium companies. And Mitra has really identified that the home service companies are the best use cases for this, given their routes, given their service territory, and given they can come back at night and charge at one location. Below is a cool graphic that kind of outlines a bit about what the project will do. So they offer, and Mitra offers turnkey EV leasing. I'll get into this on the next slide a little bit. But essentially, they offer a leasing structure rate for various vehicles to be leased to home service companies. They offer EV charger hosting, so they provide the charging infrastructure, DC fast and level 2 chargers, as well as a battery storage system operator. And then lastly, they just establishes that network that I'll get into in a minute. But the primary goal of this for us signing on to this project was to become more acquainted with this and work a bit more with our private fleets, understanding that these home service companies play a significant role in our local economies, and how we can help further their transition to electric vehicles as well. So to break us down a bit more how this works, I did this the best I could. So as a small medium business, you enter into a 3 to 5 year lease with Mitra. The vehicle size determines the lease and the rate structure. So, for example, they do offer like box trucks and bigger types of higher class vehicles. But their most popular is the GM BrightDrop, which is very comparable to a Ford E-Transit van. And that monthly lease starts at $1,500 a month. I do want to draw your attention to the bottom here. This, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but this last section right here that says price includes standard upfitting and sales tax. And that's a huge cost often that lays on the home service company is upfitting that vehicle to fit its use case and that business need. And so this price automatically includes upfitting that vehicle as well. With the lease, you also get Mitra installs the level 2 chargers necessary for the amount of vehicles you're leasing, 2 DC fast charger dual ports, and an on-site battery storage system. This comes with the lease cost of the vehicle. And then lastly, something that I think is most beneficial is your home service company then gets to take profit from the shared charging network that's been established. So for example, I call this a semi behind the fence charging operating system, to where behind the fence just means that it's not accessible to the public to charge their vehicles on. I call this semi because the public can't, but other home service companies, the idea is to set up this virtual network so they're able to charge at your charger as well. They need to get a quick charge and a DC fast charger to continue their route. And the beautiful thing about this is, as a home service company, you get to take the profit from the user fee, the usage fee from that charger. Again, just to reiterate, this graphic below does a great job of kind of illustrating that. So 3 to 5 year lease, they have here 5 BrightDrop vehicles are leased. So you pay a monthly cost of $1,500 per vehicle. Again, includes upfitting and sales tax. Mitra then also gives you the level 2 chargers and installs them, DC fast ports, as well as the on-site battery storage system. I just want to hit back home a bit more on that, and then taking the profit off the usage fee. We've seen a few EVSC providers that kind of offer this as they offer free electric vehicle charging stations, and how they recoup their investment is they take the usage fee. So you have the chargers on your property, but they collect the usage fee. To whereas in this business model, that home service company gets to also take the usage fee, which is a way to make profit on maybe an empty parking lot, for example. So this is a really, really cool project that offers kind of what I like to call kind of punches the barriers of entry in the face a little bit of home service companies that typically, can't get over the capital costs, can't get over the risk. This really limits the risk here with the lease option, as well as it really makes it more affordable with all the charging installation that's required and they're providing, as well as some of the profits you get from the charging for usage rates. And so it's a really fun project. We're really excited to be serving on it as Queen Cities, Georgia. But I do want to note, and this is important, that this project is primarily targeting fleets that are a bit larger. So your small and medium companies that are maybe like 3 to 5 vehicles to 30 vehicles in the fleet. That's their range. I would say probably 5 to 30, but we are working with a few that have a bit less than that, and we are targeting them as well. So I do want to highlight that it's important to note that not all home service companies have a physical address, or even have more than one van, for example, or 2 vans. And so they typically sometimes let their contractors take those vehicles home and reimburse them for the fuel. And that's where we wanted Queen City, Georgia, in partnership with Move EV, really wanted to kind of give those smaller home service companies another additional route to where they can kind of assess the reimbursement of charging at home and kind of see some of the incentives for that. So we do have Tim on the call today, and Tim is with Move EV. During the live audience Q&A section, if anyone has a question after what I explained, please feel free to ask Tim. I'm sure he can provide you with much more insight than I can, but I'll give my best shot here. So Move EV is a company that kind of specializes in this reimbursement rate. They work with private companies, municipalities, local governments, cities, and they offer this rate to help offer this service to help I kind of bridge the gap from reimbursing for fuel and reimbursing for charging, which makes it a lot easier for a home service company to then convert to an electric vehicle. And this next graphic here does a great job at really explaining that. And so it's a fast setup. What happens is after it's set up, the employee just uploads their utility bill monthly. Move EV takes that information, kind of disperses it into what's the actual reimbursement rate for the vehicle charging a home and compare it to the rest of the power the home used. And then is able to help you give the amount to then reimburse the company to then reimburse that employee. Like I mentioned, this is a really cool opportunity for home service companies that potentially have, let's say, 2 to 3 vans, 2 to 3 vehicles that are running, and want to maybe think about converting to electric vehicles because there's a lot of funding incentives out there, but have a hard time thinking about, I don't have a physical address to install chargers. How are my employees going to install chargers? They can install them at home. And it's a lot cheaper to charge at night, and they actually end up saving a ton of money in terms of fuel reimbursement, which over the total cost of ownership can be really, really strategic. And so just wanted to put that out there as a way to kind of target the smaller home service companies as well, and to give them some kind of opportunity to take advantage of some of the federal funding that's available that I'm sure Grayson will talk about as well. And there's going to be talked about in our moderator questions too. So yeah, that is the Mitra and EV project. That is Move EV. I'm going to toss it over to Grayson to talk a bit about Long Capital. Just to give you a quick purview, Grayson's company is awesome. I've had opportunity to meet Grayson a few times, and it's really interesting business model. And so, Grayson, please take it away and let me know when to keep moving slides. I'm happy to do it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me, and appreciate you guys your support for letting us talk about our business to the group and y'all's network. Yeah, my name's Grayson. I'm the owner of Lawn Capital. We're a local landscape provider, home service business, similar to what he's been talking about all that webinar regarding businesses transitioning to their fleet and all that good stuff. But we kind of took it a step further, and we're 100% electric with everything from our vehicles to our fleet or to our equipment. So everything our guys are using and teams are using are 100% electric. We can kind of dive into it on the next slide and talk a little bit more about our services and what we do. So yeah, we're a turnkey landscape provider. We provide everything from installation to maintenance. Our core business is our landscape maintenance, which is the recurring site visits that we are on for our commercial and residential clients. We're about half and half commercial and residential. We service the in-town market, so kind of think inside the perimeter of Atlanta. We don't go too far out. We're mostly managing apartments, HOAs, small retail, and single-family homes on the residential side. Kind of our set mission, which is to use zero toxins. We're not using anything such as glyphosate or Roundup. We're using zero gas, so everything we use is electric when it comes to the routine maintenance. Our goal is to reduce noise, so we test all of our equipment. We do extensive testing to make sure all equipment is below kind of the OSHA decibel limit for hearing protection, which is 70 decibels. So nothing's louder than a household vacuum cleaner. And obviously to reduce our fleet footprint. So one main goal we had was to reduce traditional landscaping companies are using these giant high gross vehicle weight Isuzus and Chevy vehicles and F450s to haul their equipment. One mission was to reduce that size. So how can we be more conscious with the space we're using, the size of vehicles, and increase safety of our driving, and reduce the size of the vehicles on the road. So that was a big push in the transition to electric as well. So part of our mission is to reduce our vehicle footprint in general. So that's everything from the energy we're using, the size of the vehicle, the weight on the road, all those good things to make a better impact for our services and the safety of our employees. We're about 25 employees. We run currently 6 fully electric crews on the E-Transit for the Ford E-Transit van setup and their chassis and cab. So we have some custom outfitted electric vehicles. Yeah, that's kind of a little bit about the company and that size. So yeah, kind of wanted to break into kind of the old versus new. So, think traditional landscape company. Everyone's seen the trucks on the road. You're typically looking at a big box truck, 16 foot, double cab. So, we transitioned from the Isuzu NPR, a diesel or gas, to the E-Transit. So, we reduced gross vehicle weight size. We reduced, size of storage, all those things. So, I think one thing that's kind of misthought of when you think of transition is, what does the transition look like in terms of rethink your setup? Do I need all this space? Is am I using Isuzu NPRs just because my competitor are? Does it actually fit my business model? So I think it's important to really break down, as a home service business or any fleet, what the actual use case of your vehicle is. And I think we've seen that with Amazon and kind of their logistics. Typically a UPS truck is 20 to 25 feet long versus, Amazon using more of the Rivian van setup. So, what do you need? Why do you need it? And, kind of going from there. So we went from the Isuzu NPR, gas or diesel powered, and we moved over to the electric E-Transit. We're looking at actually the BrightDrop as well. So, um, biggest things that changed for us was the reduction in operational headache. So my operations team not having to check the oil in the vehicles, small gas things being repaired, the reduction in vehicle weight, reduced tire issues for us, fuel cost, the noise, just general headaches that the gas fleet came with has been completely reduced, allowing my operations team to focus on our product rather than the items that are required to produce the product. Um, Definitely had some successes, kind of what works and what didn't. The challenges was the electric vehicles in general. Obviously, you have a reduction in range. You're going to have a reduction in space comparative to a gas chassis or diesel chassis. So there's definitely changes there that you have to make. So we had to kind of rethink our operations. If on residential, if we're using a 40 Transit extended length high roof van, but we have a large amount of debris to remove from the site. What are we doing there? So kind of setting that up with the operations team. Have we have another truck or runner that kind of come around and help the crew support on debris. So there's situations where you definitely feel it, but huge successes in terms of decrease in cost, decreased time spent on fleet. It's quieter, strong client, satisfaction. Our clients are much happier, giving money to our company, frankly, just because, of our investments we've made in some of these items. So, those have been some huge successes and definitely have some challenges. Initial investment costs were extremely high. We started this transition a year ago. The prices have dropped on, electric vehicles, but, we've kind of averaged down on those costs. But charging infrastructure was a huge pain. There's a lot more resources today than there was necessarily, 12, 18 months ago when we were researching this. So, important to note that, we had to figure a lot of that out on our own. We had to get quotes. It's kind of the Wild West when you're at your own shop and trying to figure out charging infrastructure upgrades. Um, I would say financial impact has been the most impressive thing. Costs, I look at it, my background is actually in finance and accounting. So, you do all the spreadsheets, you do it all live. And the question is, all the dealers, all the Ford reps, all the equipment, representatives are, telling you, hey, you're going to save all this money. But is it true? And we found it is true. I would say we've reduced costs on a view on a maintenance route by about 10%. You're swapping a little bit of operational expenses for depreciation. Those are the hidden unknowns. How long these vehicles will last? How long will the equipment last? What will the batteries be like in 4 or 5 years? But there's been advantages such as government credits, the $7,500 per vehicle. So here's a little bit. Here's our first setup. This is what we called Z1. This was our pilot, 100% electric. So, took some custom outfitting. But this is the smallest, when we started our transition in our fleet, we started with our smallest property. So our residential, quarter acre or less. So started there, and now we're all the way up to about 4 or 5 acres on property size on the commercial. But here's an example of, one of our crews. This is what we call Z1. We completely upfit them. They're totally customized. You can see we take the back doors off, put a ramp on them for easy, storage and access. And this is how we've made it work. Yeah, so I mean, why we went electric? Good question. We definitely, I knew we needed a change. We needed a competitive advantage, and to be frank, the operational headaches of gas and diesel were becoming so burdensome post-pandemic. A lot of people forget, but trying to get as a small business in the 2021 to 2022 era, trying to get repairs on a diesel vehicle as a small business. I mean, you just couldn't. It couldn't happen. We had trucks in the shops for 6 months. Parts were behind. They were back ordered. As a small business without a mechanic on site, without a giant operation here, um, gas and diesel, you're at the whim of, bigger mechanic shops. So we were using Rush Truck Centers, and you kind of get pushed around when Amazon's, getting 100 vehicles serviced. As a small business, 1 to 2, you're kind of, you're out of luck. So that, we were having operational bottlenecks with gas and diesel. We were having, huge issues with, we were having huge issues with employee health and general with the equipment. That's more of an equipment issue than a fleet. The large box trucks were kind of a safety hazard in terms of accidents. We're having to constantly train how to drive those vehicles in the city. So reducing a lot of those headaches was a big reason. And then obviously costs. I did the math and seemed too good to be true. On top of that, gives us an edge on sustainability. Client feedback has been huge. People love it. We're in the landscape business, and I firmly believe that if there's one business or industry that should be pro the environment, it should probably be the landscapers, which is not the case, unfortunately, throughout the industry. So that's kind of a big thing that we take seriously. In terms of employee experience, it's totally improved employee experience. The electric vehicles are, almost double, there's, twice as nice than a traditional Isuzu. They have all the features, Apple CarPlay, it's a great experience. So, these are my employees' offices, during the day. So what does that experience look like? Am I in an old beat up, Isuzu diesel or even a newer one that's just, big and clunky? Or am I in a very nice, uh, uh, you know, electric vehicle that has all the top safety features, and I know my employees will be safe. So those were kind of the main benefits and main reasons why we went, and that's kind of a little bit about Lawn Capital and what we've done.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Grayson. It's been super informative. I'm going to move into some moderator questions first, but I do want to just reference the chat for a minute. Tim, I saw your point. Thanks for making that point. I do want to add, I forgot to mention, with the Mitra EV project, that BrightDrop lease rate at $1,500 also includes the four F-150 Lightnings as well. So you can get this Ford Lightning, which is the typical pickup truck, for that same lease structure as well with that project. And Dennis, I saw your question as well. We'll get to that question in the live Q&A. We'll make sure we get that one in first. So thank you very much for posing that. All right. So these are just some questions I came up with. I have 2 slides here. We're not going to get to all of them. I actually, though, before we get into these questions, Grayson, I wrote down something you said that I thought was extremely interesting. You said that you needed to make an operational change for an operational advantage. And I'm just curious that's something that I have not thought of in terms of like home service companies trying to have taking this in the fact of making it an operational advantage. So can you just kind of maybe elaborate a bit more on what the thought process was on that and how you saw this as an operational advantage?
Yeah, so we manage a fleet, right? So there's people in my organization who are responsible for those components, and as we grow, the fleet is extremely important. We don't do any work on site, so we come to the shop and we go out. And how that process, I always joke that the landscaping business is almost like the worst of all businesses combined. We have small tools, it's fleet, logistics, all these issues, right? That home service businesses deal with estimating, materials. So when it comes to fleet and logistics, it's such a, that can make or break your P&L. I mean, just like that. So if your operations team is consistently just going through fleet issues, which, was feedback originally when we transitioned was my operations team was concerned about this. What if these batteries don't work? What if we can't charge? What if we run out of juice? All these issues, which didn't come to, just didn't happen. But on the gas side, it was always an issue. Something was breaking. The you're at the whim of repair shops and such. So I would say that the reliability of the electric platforms have been 10 times and allowed my operations team to really shift from, a large portion of their role involved in fleet and equipment to now quality and our product and service. So that's probably been, the biggest, and that wasn't originally planned necessarily, but it's how it turned out.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and I think that's really interesting that you looked at it from an advantage standpoint, because I feel like a lot of, especially and just my assumption, I feel like a lot of home service companies might be missing that taking it as an advantage and looking at it as a way to weed out competition, for example, and that's a really interesting concept. I'm
Yeah.
going to skip around a few of his questions here because you covered a bit about the first one, why you went electric. One thing I do want to ask though is a second question. So, can you walk us through the initial planning process? How do you assess which vehicles to replace and when to start?
Yeah, so we took a staggered approach where I took our smallest properties. I knew I wanted our landscape maintenance department to go all electric. In full disclosure, our construction side does, it's still using gas and diesel. This much heavy duty our first
Right.
initial goal is to transition. 2024 goal is to transition the entire landscape maintenance fleet. So we got two more vehicles to go, and I think we're going to hit that number before next year. But I started with the smallest properties. So, if I was any home service business, I would start with, what's my closest, smallest jobs with the smallest route, and I start there. Super simple. We got, a level two plug in there. We just used the standard four charger that came with it. Tested, vehicle one. Ran it for 3 weeks, tested all the equipment, got, employee feedback, customer feedback. Then we moved on to the next one. So we adjusted our routes. We were at quarter acre property, and then we're like, okay, now let's test half an acre properties, and then let's test. So we kind of went one, two, three, four, five, and now we're all the way up on our commercial vehicles, and now we're just now we're able to transition, and we don't sell any gas services on our maintenance side. It makes too much sense what we're doing now. So that's how we did it. We obviously had a charging issue eventually, so I went out to it was funny. Our first client actually worked for Tesla, and his name's Mark, and he helped us with he's on the Tesla charging infrastructure team, and he kind of got in his network. He's at Georgia Tech, and I networked with people, and they helped me. We ended up using the Tesla wall universal chargers, and daisy chained them, and kind of understood our charging needs. I'd say we went with Ford at first for their charging needs, and um, a lot of these charging infrastructure people are pushing high amperage, like faster charging, where in reality, I need to use, I have a limited amount of power. I don't want to upgrade power, and I need to charge, I have 12 hours to charge every night. So I don't necessarily need 80 amps because,
Yeah.
I'm not going to have someone here at the depot to move the charger around. So, I need less amperage per charger spread across, the entire system there. So kind of worked with a bunch of electricians and people on that and kind of figured it out from there.
Yeah, that's super interesting, especially with the first client. That's really funny, actually.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead and skip the third question because you talked about your challenges you've experienced. I'm gonna go into the fourth question, and this is really kind of a vehicle selection question. So you mentioned this a little bit about like you plan the route based off of the smallest route you can get back in time to charge. Can you mention why you went with the Ford Transit? I know the BrightDrop is a relatively new option, and so I'm not sure if just that was the only option you can go with, or I know that there are some electric box trucks that could have been used. I know that comes at a higher capital cost, but just
Yeah.
kind of outlining that process of what made Long Capital kind of go towards that Ford Transit
Yeah. So
selection.
this was June or May 2023, and I don't think there was another van option I could go to a dealer and buy. So at the time, the E-Transit was Isuzu's didn't launch their, EV chassis till I think it just launched. The Bright Drop wasn't out, Rams wasn't out, Rivian wasn't sold to, the public yet. So I think at the time, and I could be corrected, there might have been another option, but the only place I could go to a dealership and buy an electric van was through Ford. So we looked at that versus the F-150 Lightning. In general, my goal is to eliminate trailers. It can be used and it will be used once we hit the last two crews we're looking to transition are, they carry more than two people. So that's the issue on
Yep.
the Transit chassis is a two-seater. So once we move to the next step there, we'll have to probably use the F-150 Lightning with the a trailer for a four-seater. But so that was just kind of how it happened. I went online and found it. I mean, the real kind of a bigger factor that I had just gotten home from a trip from Tokyo and Seoul, South Korea, and Kyoto, and I kind of watched how they operated. It's funny over there. You know, Zuzu's a Japanese company, and they don't even use. I mean, they don't even have the Zuzus we have here size wise, and they're doing similar tasks. So I was kind of encouraged and motivated and inspired by, really how do you crunch down the vehicle size? Like get the vehicle size down. I encourage that even, I kind of went back in my mind. Why did I even go with a Zuzu to start when I started this business? And it was really just because, keeping up with the Joneses, the company next door was
Yeah.
using a Zuzu. I mean, for residential home, for, landscape maintenance under 4 acres, operating at 20,000 or, the 16,000 gross vehicle weight vehicles is just they're too big that you don't need all that space. So I really took it a step further and how do we, get it down in size?
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Very two things I took away from that. Very interesting that you took a trip, saw international business doing similar work with a smaller vehicle, and that kind of formed your thought process. I will share a personal anecdote for 2 seconds. When I was in college, I started a pressure washing business, and the same thing. I just bought the Ryobi pressure washer because that's what everyone else was using at the same time. There's no thought process behind it, so I definitely understand what you're
Yeah.
saying with just keep up with the Joneses, understanding what your competition's using, and just throwing out the same thing. So give you a lot of credit for that. For the fifth question, I'm actually going to pull Dennis's question out of the chat because this really gets into the charging infrastructure question. So I'll read it aloud. And so it says, what charging infrastructure do you have for the fleet, and do you have the capability to juice the batteries from the truck as needed for extra batteries? So if you can just relate to that a little bit, kind of the charging infrastructure, and then are you have the ability to kind of juice the batteries for the lawn equipment on the truck?
Yeah, so we carry we charging infrastructure. We're using Tesla chargers. Their charging system have level 2 at the shop, and then we're using for the equipment. Yes, we're able to juice the batteries throughout the day from the core battery of the vans. So we have them hardwired into the vehicle, and we're pulling power all day, charging all day, and at the end of the day, all we do is plug in the vehicle.
Super insightful. Thank you. I'll move on to the second round of questions I have. Um, so yeah, this first question is really good actually. So how did you communicate and gain buy-in from your employees? I know this is a common thing we hear with talking, especially starting this Mitra EV process. And I'll share a bit what we learned is a lot of these home service companies don't see themselves as fleet managers. They see themselves as the company, landscaper,
Yeah.
plumber, electrician, HVAC. They don't see themselves as a fleet manager. So even though they are running a small fleet, and so how and that and what I've heard and what I've learned is that is a similar process that the same mindset and thought process that comes down to the employee too. They're not operating a fleet; they're a plumber. And so how did you gain buy-in from your employees and stakeholders and even clients? That this is like how did you kind of market that
Yeah.
operational edge to your employees and your stakeholders?
It was a lot of, on the customer side, a ton of communication. We went to all our active accounts that we were transitioning. We came up with a new plan. It's called our Plan Zero. We told them their plan was going to be transition to this. We're going to give them 30, 60 days free on this. So, we did it was a lot of legwork, especially from account management and, all that stuff. And the employee side was challenging. At first, I mean, we ran through probably 3 or 4 crews on that first vehicle. Just they didn't like the equipment.
Yeah,
They wanted the gas blowers. They wanted the gas equipment. I get it. They didn't like the truck setup. So it took a while, and that was definitely discouraging. I mean, there's a lot of heated discussions in the office.
yeah,
People didn't want to do this. So if you just got to push through, and if you know it's gonna, I mean, you got to be passionate about it. You got to find people on your team that are passionate about it, and once you get that first, I think that first setup clicking, um, people want to be in, the FOMO kind of starts, right? So it's a better experience. I mean, there's nothing worse. I'm sure everyone here has pull started a lawnmower or a
yeah.
blower. It's not, it's not even comparable the experience that the employees on our vehicles have versus a traditional company, and it's now it's turned into a net positive with employees preferring it.
That's great. I'm going to hit the second question because it's good to hear for other home service companies potentially listening in, or you're going to review after the recording is out. And so, what advice would you give other home service companies looking to calculate potential ROI? Something that we hear a lot is the capital cost that comes with this, but it's also kind of communicating the total cost of ownership. And when you and I connected a few months ago at the Queen Cities board meeting, you mentioned kind of the fuel savings a little bit that you've
Yeah.
incurred. So if you can just talk about that a bit and how maybe you value TCO a bit more than initial ROI and capital investment.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at your P&L, right? I mean, we we were big buyers of gas. We had on-site fuel, we had on-site diesel, and I mean, those were big checks every 2 weeks for the refills. So, we're buying 1,000 gallons every 2 weeks, and I mean, you can do the math on that, and plus diesel and repair costs. I mean, it was close to it's five figures monthly, and I looked at it as, can I get the fuel savings if, even after I sell the vehicle, I buy a new one, is my monthly note on, if I were to finance a 4D Transit, set all this up, is my monthly note, still less than the fuel costs associated with that vehicle, and I got a vehicle, and it's safer and it's better, so that's how I simplified it in my mind.
Yeah.
Obviously ran, some pretty intense models on it and all that, but I would say, start with one. I think the bigger issue is the accounting behind it. And, small businesses do not have forensic accounting on, exactly how much each truck is spending on fuel. And, it's majority of the time grouped in, and you have average accounting. So so when you transition one truck, you're not really going to see a huge drop on your expenses. You're just going to see the cost of that setup. It's when we didn't start seeing the savings until we hit like five or six. I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
we're not, you know, they came and picked up our fuel tanks at the, at our depot. The gas company, uh, canceled our contract. So that's when I saw, okay, wow, this is starting to make money. But yeah, you got to run the numbers. You got to look at, if you employ 25 people, plus probably larger, there's people in there that are EV fanatics. I mean, it's not a small community anymore, and see who would be happier as an employee.
Yeah, that's a great call, and that's why I just find this MITRA EV project brief so interesting because it kind of, and I know you alluded to in the past, one thing that you're still navigating is depreciation on these vehicles, and this kind of offers this low risk lease, 3 to 5 year lease that you don't have to worry about the depreciation because you're leasing the vehicle A, and B, you don't have that initial upfront cost. You have a monthly lease structure. You get
Yeah.
the charges provided to you. So it's a really interesting model. Just in conscious of time. I want to get to two more questions and have roughly 10 minutes for live audience questions. So they're going to be my last two questions here. So just curious, what steps did you take to assess tax credits? And there's two I kind of called out here. The IRS has the alternative fuel vehicle refueling property tax credit, just do tax incentives to install chargers, as well as, and you mentioned it, the clean vehicle tax credit, which is a $7,500 tax credit. So did you do that yourself? Did you go to an accountant? How did that work for you?
Yeah, the language, like for the reference, the commercial clean vehicle tax credit was like, we had some issues with, so we acquired all these vehicles, and there was no language on whether the commercial tax credit, and I'm not a CPA, so do not take
Right.
tax advice from me, but the commercial tax credit, would it roll over? So like on a personal side, if you go before they did the instant, at the
Yeah.
dealer point of sale. if you didn't have taxes to pay on it, then it wouldn't roll over. So when you start acquiring a bunch of vehicles, you can take, bonus depreciation and all that,
Yeah.
which can really drive your bottom line, your net income down. And then now you have, you know, say you had 10 of these credits, do they roll forward? So, yeah, there were some moments where I thought, oh wow, I just bought all these vehicles. We're not going to have net income this year and on the tax level, and we're not going to be able to roll these. But the language came out, they allow you to roll them. Do your own homework. But yeah, we, navigated with accountants. The language, it's very unclear. Like one issue we had was on the equipment side. The language on the commercial credit is it's like it has to have four vehicles. The battery has to be over X amount of kilowatt hours. So like, do the commercial lawnmowers count? These are
Yeah.
$30,000 machines or whatever. Do I get 7,500 on those? That's still unclear. They still don't have proper. So it's very unclear. It's constantly changing. And you got to work with your accountant on that and just make sure your ducks are in a row to qualify for all that. But yeah, I mean, the 7,500 is very helpful. I'd say for sure.
Yeah, definitely agree. And that's something that, we're seeing through some of our stakeholders and members that are, municipalities through direct pay. They're able to, a non-taxed entity is able to experience some of these credits, which has been really helpful for local, county and city fleets to purchase electric vehicles.
Yeah.
I will just quickly hit the last question, and then we will turn over to live Q&A. And you've mentioned this a little bit in terms of just planning the route. But if you can, I just know that a lot of home service fleets are have range anxiety, and it could be because of they have three vans and they need to get to the other side of the city type deal, or it's just strictly like you mentioned, I just need gasoline. Maybe it's that mental hurdle of change in this space. So maybe just how did you address that? And that could have been with your employees, really. How did you address the range anxiety bit of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, it was this Monday. I don't know what happened, but one of the vans didn't charge, so it was at 30%, and yeah, they could only work till 10 a.m. It was just
Yeah,
it was what it was. It happens. I mean, but you'd have that issue of gas. A gas truck would go down. I mean, day would be done. It is what it is. So I'm not, it's not a new problem to have those issues. You just got to plan. You got to plan your routes, and I look at it as this. Hey, I mean, at 90%, we charge the 90% daily. The rated range is 110 to 120. We're probably getting more like 95 to 100. If we're driving over 80 miles, we're not making any money. I mean, that's probably it's just there's too much windshield time. I mean, drive 80 miles throughout Metro Atlanta and
yeah,
see how much time on site billable hours you're actually going to get. So, it's low. So I look at it that way too. We need to be on site more frequently. We need to have compact routes. We have to look at all that. So it's definitely a thing. There's Ford opened up the charging, or Tesla opened up the charging infrastructure to Ford.
yeah.
So, there's a lot of chargers out there. It's definitely not as convenient as, fueling up, but you can make it work.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over to live Q&A, audience Q&A, and I'll just read Dennis's question in the chat real fast. And it just says, based off the last bullet we just mentioned, are you making use of any portable chargers?
For the vehicles or for the equipment?
I think he's typing back in the chat the answer.
Okay. Vehicles, no, we're not using any portable charging. When you say portable charging, you mean like charging stations throughout the city? Like a
Dennis,
supercharger?
feel free to come off mute as well if you want to just talk about it. Yep.
Sure. No. Yeah. Thanks for that. No. What I was thinking is, sometime in the last year or more, we've seen some portable, basically portable batteries that
Yeah.
you can pull behind a car, truck, or whatever, or even stick it in the back of a truck if you have the room or whatever. That's only going to have like 10 to 20 kilowatt hours available to you to possibly extend what you got going on.
Yeah, I've seen that, and there's actually some cool upfitters. I forgot the name of them that'll do an e-transit range extender. One issue we come into is payload. So available payload. So like on our larger commercial vehicles, The E-Transit, we put a custom box on them. You have a, they're 9,500 gross vehicle weight. So after you account for the vehicle, and that's one issue actually with the new 2024 E-Transits is they upgraded it to the extended range battery, which I think is 90 kilowatt hours. So your available payload just keeps dropping. And so if I can't haul any, an electric lawnmower is 1,000 pounds. So, if I need to carry two of those, so if I have, 2,500 pounds of payload, available, it kind of it gets hairy. So we do so we do carry around 5 kilowatt hours of energy for the equipment. So we do carry that, so we don't completely pull from the vehicle all day. That thing gets charged at least once or twice throughout the day. So we minimize a little bit of the range loss from that. But we have not done it for the vehicles. I have seen that, but I don't know how well it works, and I haven't seen someone show me it in person. I think we gotta wait for higher gross vehicle weight vehicles, and it'll hopefully get better.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. Any other questions from the audience? All right. Well,
But I like Tim's comment on the level 1 for a F-150 Lightning. It's interesting. We haven't looked at that.
So when you're on site, are you actually plugging into the customer's plugs?
No, we're not. But I mean, he has an interesting point of you could, in theory, 10 to 100%. I'd say the most expensive cost, right, for a small business is if you have 20 vehicles and you got to upgrade power. I mean, I
Yeah,
got
the
a quote from.
infrastructure costs. There's obviously a strong case for your type of business that you're gonna need some level of depot charging. But if you send vehicles home, being able to charge those vehicles at home is the most cost-effective way for the actual fueling, if you will. And in terms of infrastructure, there is some challenges potentially that are out there from a risk perspective of putting like network chargers in. So whether it's a level 1 or a level 2, you have options that are out there that can do it. And then it's just about how do you pay the employee for the right cost. If interested, that's what our product does in terms of software is pull from their utility bill and matches up the actual electricity of that vehicle, not taking an average rate, what is happening for that exact vehicle and that vehicle, not another EV they might have at their home.
Gotcha.
Cool.
Well, thanks for having me.
yeah, thank you, everyone. And
Great work.
appreciate the time and everyone took it out. My email address is here if anyone has any further questions, and Grayson's is below as well. Tim, if you want to drop your email in the chat, that'd be great, and I can disperse that out as well. And like I mentioned, Tim's with MoveEV with the reimbursement rate for that, so that'd be helpful. Everyone, again, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it, and hopefully this was educational and encouraging. And thank you again for coming. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.